Yeah, yeah, I mean, depending on what kind of advice stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, well,
Right, well, good evening, councillors. Good evening, Lisa. And good evening to absent friends in the public gallery and anybody who happens to be watching. The first item on the agenda is to receive apologies from absence. I think there's apologies from Councillor Davis.
Yeah.
Do we accept those apologies?
Yeah.
Representation from interested parties, none. We'll have a little bit more discussion about that in relation to a specific application later. Declarations of interest. Any disclosable pecuniary interests?
No.
Any other interests?
No.
The minutes of our last meeting, which was on the 6th of February, have been circulated. Present myself, Councillor Chester, Councillor Arnold, Councillor Davis, Councillor Fuller and Councillor Shura. Full house last time. Anybody have any amendments or we happen to propose them?
I'll propose them.
Proposed Councillor Fuller, seconded Councillor Chester. All those in favour? Bear with me, there's another 7 pages to sign. Right. That takes us straight on into the applications themselves. The first of which is one we've seen before, 19 Herne Road, which doesn't sound much until you realise that it's basically the access to the proposed McCarthy Stone retirement living apartments, of which there will be 42, and a new bungalow to replace the existing number 19 Herne Road. We were not happy, I think it's fair to say, when the application was originally considered. And I think we have all had a copy of our fairly lengthy response to our application, which is that document there. Well, a new application, well, not a new application, a further set of documents have gone in from the developer, accompanied by this letter from the Planning Bureau Limited, who seem to be acting in effect as their agents, which sets out under various headings comments about changes that they have made, responses to submissions received. And as you will see, I did the usual report, in which I indicated that there were a number of new documents there. They included, apart from the letter I've just waved at you, a further transport note or assessment, a noise assessment, some revised site plans, amendments to boundary treatments, and to the elevations of the on-site substation. Interesting way of pushing it. Sorry about that. I'm afraid just to myself. Yes, it talked about elevations to the substation, but we heard just before the meeting started that we've had a comment from a neighbour who believes that the physical location of the substation is being moved to a location effectively proximate to her kitchen window. in which case it will be a good job if what they say in their noise assessment is correct, that the noise that would come from there wouldn't really exceed normal background noise. It does seem to me that we are ill-equipped to form a view on noise other than to highlight a concern, and that others who have the expertise within the planning authority look at that particular issue. And I think it was one of the things we flagged up before. I think it's fair to say there are an awful lot of comments already on the site. At least there certainly were at the time of the last application. When I looked at it on Sunday morning, there were a total of 24 private responses and a further 22 consultee responses. At the time I looked at it, there were no new comments from the public in relation to the new material, which could, of course, be that they're blissfully unaware of it. There were one or two comments that had come in from consultees, of which the most significant was that the Fire and Rescue Service seemed to now be satisfied that they had put a fire main within the development, and that seems to have assuaged their concerns. Natural Gas and EPA, the pipeline people, basically said this ain't going to affect us, so we haven't any comments to make. As I said in this letter, they look specifically at comments made by NNC Environmental Protection, NNC Highways, Fire and Rescue Service that I've already mentioned, and Nature Development. Obviously, the issue from our perspective is, does what they have done alter our view in relation to the application? And just so that we can refresh our memory, we started off basically by saying, well, you may actually have now overestimated the demand for this, bearing in mind you've got Aberhams, you've got Strongbridge, you've got Parson Mayfields, you've got the Riverside Maltings, which is somewhat different to the other three. But you've also got planning permission for a 62-unit extra care facility. So, query, do we really need another 42 units? That was the first point we made. Accompanied by a remark that there was a single and very overstretched GP practice in the town, and it seems likely that, given the demographic they're suggesting would occupy the residential units, that's going to put additional pressure on the GP practice. There is, amongst the responses from consultees to the application, and it was in before the latest wave of documents, from NHS Northamptonshire, which basically said, we haven't got the capacity at all, but then later on it says, however, if you were going to grant permission, we want a section 106 and we want 27,000 and something other pounds, which struck me as a relatively minor sum for a surgery that's described itself as overstretched and beyond capacity. I mean, I don't know what £27,000 buys you, but I would have thought remarkably little. And compared to the extra demand that I think it would generate, I'm somewhat nonplussed by the figures, let's put it that way. We had queried the number of traffic movements, which the applicant was suggesting might take place. We wanted there to be more on-site parking. I don't think that the revised site plan indicates any significant changes to on-site parking. We said there should be a space for each unit and an additional visitor spaces as well, on the basis that there are likely to be people who will frankly going to be popping in and out to see people living there throughout the day. We were concerned about Herne Road or Red Kite Drive being used for on-street parking in connection with the development. We pointed out that there might be ambulances that we need to visit, the health professionals, all of which will require parking spaces, as well as vans that might be delivering online groceries and other deliveries. It's interesting when you look at the new documentation submitted in terms of the transport note, and points that the highways department have made about wanting to be satisfied that vehicles of certain types will be able to access the development, to which the developer's response seems to me to be more or less, well, they won't, on the basis of what they're sort of expecting. Now, they may be right in terms of the very specific type of vehicle that was mentioned by highways, but it seems entirely probable to me that if you've got 42 retirement units, you may find that the occupants prefer to do online shopping rather than actually go into town. And consequently, there might well be deliveries taking place there, and it needs the capacity to deal with it. It's also interesting because in the highways response, they said, well, we really need bus stops on either side of the road so that buses could basically service this development, to which the developers seem to have more or less suggested there's no room and it wouldn't frankly be realistic or economic for buses to visit, and we're rather dismissive of that point. We talked about the road really having its problems, bearing in mind the amount of pedestrian traffic that this might generate, the fact that there might be mobility scooters and so on. So we took the view that even if the development was required, this might not be the ideal place for it. We then actually weren't happy with the size of the proposed building, we were unhappy about overlooking issues, and we said that the proximity of the substation might cause a noise nuisance to at least one nearby residence. And we suggested that accommodation should be on ground and first floor levels only with no dormer windows. I did notice actually when I was looking through the stuff that there were concerns from residents on Red Kite Drive about overlooking from balcony areas. It wasn't a point we'd actually specifically made, although we talked about overlooking in general. We said, well, if you are going to authorise it, there needs to be a clear lighting scheme in place to minimise light pollution from the site. And we said that the recommendations from bodies such as Nature Space and others should be taken into account. And we then also concluded by saying, and if you give permission, there ought to be an adequate construction management plan, essentially trying to ensure that there were not traffic movements going on to the site at the same time as pupils were coming to or coming from school. So the question really is, in my mind, to what extent, if at all, have the apparent changes that have been made by the developer answered any or all our concerns? My understanding is we don't need to reiterate those concerns because they're already there. So it's more a question of either saying X has alleviated our concern about Y, or conceivably saying X having happened, we are now concerned about Z, which we were in fact concerned about before. So there we are. I don't know whether everybody did or didn't read that letter from the Planning Bureau Limited. It's quite a long letter, or I'd read it out, but it really is relatively long. Councillor Fuller then. Councillor Sugar.
I think, I think the idea is good, but I think where's being played, I still have this issue, having had a son, and a number of us have had children go to Prince William School. The nightmare of driving up and down is one of the worst places for traffic issues at certain times of the day. It is a dead end. It will add more traffic, whatever they're saying. And for that, there's a lot of mitigating things they have to do before I think I'll be happy with it being there. You've already said it's probably the wrong place. And that's a single thing.
Councillor Sugar.
Well, we've discussed this application at length on previous occasions, and you've summarised or articulated some of our previous concerns. What we have is a resubmission. It clearly doesn't address all of those concerns. It's just tinkered at the edges, in my opinion, and I think it kind of feels that, oh, well, you know, if we give a little ground here, then that will be fine. Well, no, I don't think it is fine. And I think we should continue to object until all of our concerns are met. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
The concerns aren't going to go away just by tinkering at the edges.
I understand that. Councillor
Just
Jessie.
going back to the Herne Road entrance and exit, which is the same place.
Do you mean the entrance and exit to the site, or actually
Yeah.
Herne Road into South Road?
Herne Road into South.
Yes.
That's also,
It's on a slope, it's
Yeah.
extremely
It's a blind
slippery
turn
when
as
it's,
well,
and
isn't it?
it's a blind turn. And that, I go up and down there countlessly, obviously, because I live off it. There's always somebody blasting round the corner now. It's not Sleepy Hollow like it may have been 20 years ago. And it is a very, very dangerous turning now. And even physically, it's dangerous because it's on a slope and very prone to frost, any frost and ice about. And of course, they don't do the roads with quite such fervour as they used to.
well, they used to do a lot more, didn't they?
Yes. Before we come to you, Councillor Arnold, have you got anything you want to?
No, not really. I think, unfortunately for us, if you like, there is a need for this type of building, I think. People are living longer, which is good, but I know it's a very nice place to live, especially I'd imagine if you're older. But, like has been said, I'm not sure it's the right place. And our infrastructure, as we all know, can't accommodate something like this really right now.
Councillor Fuller and Councillor
If
Sugar.
we're looking at long term and the plans that we've got for the traffic, where we've got a one-way system going down South Road, that will inevitably increase the traffic going down South Road. So you've got potentially more traffic, Herne Road, South Road. I mean, they're all going in the right direction, but I think in long-term planning, does this fit within our plans for South Road being used as a major route through Amber, which is not at the moment?
Councillor Sugar.
Thank you. Sorry, I was going to emphasise a point you made earlier already, Chair, and that is, because I don't think we perhaps did emphasise it enough in our previous set of comments, and that is the sum of money that you pointed out that's being proposed to go to the NHS is derisory, in my opinion, given that the healthcare of this community is going to be vast. I just don't see how they arrive at that figure. And then the second point I was going to make is probably one that's already just been made, and that is, it's about the way construction vehicles are going to actually physically get to the site. And that, I think, pushes a lot of traffic into the South Road, which again, I don't think it can physically take it. I mean, the road I drove down at the weekend, and it's effectively, even when cars aren't parked on the north side of the road, it's effectively one way because of the potholes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I suspect the potholes are not really a planning consideration in the sense that they ought to be fixed.
They ought to be
And that
fixed.
might be a separate point we should be making.
I know it's a minor point, but that road cannot take major vehicles, you know, it's.
Doing the losses there.
I know, well, that's part of the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I should stress that that figure that I've mentioned of £27,000 isn't the figure being proposed by the developer, but is a figure sought
Oh, yes, sorry, by the
secretly
NHS,
by the
yeah.
NHS,
Yeah.
local maintenance society, where they conjured that one up from. How far they honestly think that's going to go is.
No, the developer must be,
Not beyond
I can imagine.
I get the distinct impression that you don't really feel much has changed, and certainly not enough has changed to swing us behind the application. So I think we want to maintain the objection. Whether there is anything specific about what they've said, I am tempted, if we were going to say anything, to just perhaps emphasise the noise thing, because it's been specifically brought to our attention. And I know that there's a technical exercise going on here, and they may well be right. Maybe the amount of noise from this substation will be minimal. But I think we just want the experts to check it out and make sure that what is being suggested is right, particularly if it is actually being relocated closer to an existing residential property. Other than that, I don't know there's a great deal more to say. It does appear that the developer is sort of somewhat on board about lighting issues, but it's not entirely clear to me in what way. But they stick, as I say, to their guns on parking areas and everything else. So, if we simply maintain the objection and maybe highlight two of the points that we've discussed this evening, I'll put something together
Thank you.
for Lisa later. Right, let's move on to something probably a little less controversial. Sectionals Yard. This is a garage conversion, so an existing detached and single garage incorporated essentially into the bungalow as part of a kind of a whole-scale renovation. There's an existing conservatory with a kind of glazed roof. There's a porch that's also going to have its roof done. The conservatory roof's going to be tiled as opposed to being glass. And they're going to put in their source heat pump to the west elevation. There are, I think, I might in saying, some photographs that might be of some assistance there. So that, I think, shows the garage, the detached garage from the rear. And there's the detached garage from the front. And there's the conservatory that already exists at the back. If we could go to the sort of the proposals in terms of elevations and the like. So on the top, you get a good view in the sense of how this will start to look. And essentially you've got or a bungalow occupying the majority of the site in which it stands.
Fair enough.
Did indicate on the report that I did that environmental protection wanted a condition in relation to the air source heat pump, the details of which I set out. NNC Highways don't object, but they've made remarkable their usual observations around visibility displays, minimum width of vehicular accesses, surface accesses. I think they took the view, reading it, that actually the existing access to Secretary's Yard is not actually compliant. But since it's that way anyway, and has been since this thing was built, there's not a lot they probably can do about it. So it is what it is. Essentially, by doing what they're going to do, there will be an additional bedroom to the rear, and then a shower room, then at the front end of what appears to be a utility room, garage door on the front elevation will be replaced with a window, but also a door straight into the utility room. Those to be you can usually see. Currently the windows are timber. And essentially this means the bungalow can be a 2-bed bungalow to a 3-bed bungalow. The applicant makes the point that actual access to the property doesn't change, and there are currently 3 parking spaces which are indicated in one of the plans. I cannot remember which one, probably a site plan. Yeah, probably a site plan.
4.9.
Yeah.
Susan's here.
So, yeah,
It's probably not much difference, will it?
we'll squeeze it in, as it were. Councillor Chestnut.
We are sort of a bit anti people who squeeze stuff in. Is it overdevelopment of the site? Garage is one thing, but more accommodation is something, quite a lot more.
I think I probably would have taken a slightly different view if they were building onto it, into an area where there was currently nothing, and occupying most of the width of the site as a result. I might have felt that was more overdevelopment, although I do take your point. We do usually worry about the lots of garaging as well. So I got the distinct impression, I don't know why, because it's not said expressly, but I got the distinct impression that we don't use the garage anyway as a garage.
It's only single, so.
And you make the point
Now,
of a single
yeah,
garage. So if you think about NNC Highways, you regard a double garage as a single garage. In fact, a single garage doesn't kind of rate. I mean, there's no doubt that there is the space to do what they want to do. I can't see that there's going to be any great impact on any neighbouring properties from what they're planning to do on either. Councillor Fuller?
Before and after, I mean, Lisa's doing that for us now. I don't think I agree totally with David's ideas. Parking is not going to change. It's not making any difference to the overall size of the building. It's filling in a bit of an air gap. I have no problems with this at all.
Councillor Schiller?
I don't think I have any problems with it. I'm just utterly confused, because if you actually look on Google Earth, there's no vehicular access to the garage whatsoever.
It's down this little
I don't understand how that's a garage.
there.
Well, I suppose you could say it's a garage because it looks like a garage, it's built like a garage, it's not used for garaging.
Oh, yeah, how do you get to the garage?
Because they can get to the garage.
So they haven't got a garage they can use.
It's not a garage at all. My concern is that they're calling it a garage, it's really not a garage.
Well, since it isn't going to be a garage, or it isn't going to be not a garage anymore.
It's a kind of mute point.
Well,
It's
fundamentally,
garage.
It's got a driveway to it though.
Well, okay, maybe this is just out of date, maybe it's an optical illusion. But the way it's on here, you can't see how you can physically get a car to it. But anyway, as I said, it's a mute point, I don't really have an issue. You know, they've got plenty of car parking, you know, over and above the garage space that clearly is used as a garage.
The only is, my favourite thing is construction management plan. Is this gonna have an impact on, anything?
I mean, the thing about sections,
I've never been down there, so I don't know how big it is.
it's not that big.
Doesn't matter.
And at least some of the properties in sections here are listed. The access is big enough from the point of view of getting vehicles in and out. It's not going to be easy if you have vehicles or a skip or what have you outside for other occupants, but there's absolutely nowhere else it could go. I mean, the reality is, if you said, well, you'll have to put it out on West Street and service it from there, frankly, that's going to cause even more problems than if it stays in Section's yard. And for what it's worth, certainly as of Sunday, there were no complaints from neighbours objecting or even raising that as a concern. So I understand why you say it.
Yeah.
I'm kind to probably say that
Okay.
it's hopefully not going to be an issue. There's the various comments that NNC made, they describe it as observations, but seems somewhat critical of the current setup, as I'm saying. I get the impression that whilst we're not totally convinced, I don't think any of us is actually objecting.
No.
Okay, I'll record it as an objection. 8 West Street.
This is,
This is very interesting.
I'm confused.
Earlier today, and at the express invitation of Mr. Simon Grace and Grace Cliff Developments, I met him on site to discuss that application. I don't know how many of you are really familiar with that location, but where Johnson's the Butchers was that became Seven Wells, that is now Savile Travel, that Butchers extended back through the property a long way. This is one of those occasions, it's almost easier to get up here. So, the frontage is here, and this is what was the main butcher's shop. And here is an access to the flats that are above there. There's residential accommodation, it's currently let out on a standard short tenancy. That is a new unit which has already got planning permission, it's already finished. And that Mr. Grace was kind enough to show you around it, and they made a smart job of it. There's an area here, but behind it, there has, excuse me, a small kitchen area, a loo and an office. It will make a nice unit. It is not currently let. He told me that in fact they had interest from places like kebab shops, but it wasn't the sort of business they wanted there, so they haven't gone down that route. But what they're looking at is that stretch there, and then right at the end here, there is actually a garage that faces back up. So this is a whole yard, there's the way, and there's what is going to be the garage. At the moment, this is extremely run down and dilapidated. Some of it is kind of open, at the front. Most of it isn't that open at the front, and it's in about 4 sections. And it has a sort of slated roof. The plan would be to replace the slated roof with a metal sheet roof, and then, as you can see, build these units. And I know that circulated with the agenda was some material that the developers provided to give a rather better visual impression of this. These 3 units are all pretty small. The one at the end in the garage is getting on for twice the size of those, but all of them are small. Undoubtedly, it looks a mess at the moment. You can't really see it from West Street, other than looking deliberately down there. There are big gates, but they're often open. They will certainly open this afternoon. So, putting something in here is going to certainly smarten it up. It's slightly disappointing, there's nothing you can do about it, but this section of the building here, particularly that window, and a window that is there, is completely out of keeping with the rest of the building. I mean, it just sticks out like a sore thumb, but I think it's probably been that way since the 50s or 60s. And he did say that as part of the plans, they would almost certainly do something with this, certainly in terms of repainting it and making it smarter. I did suggest that the windows could do with some tension. He plans, if permission is granted, it's not part of the current application, and you might have to put in a separate advertising application, but I think he plans to put something at the frontage to sort of indicate what's down there. Interestingly enough, his current plan is to encourage businesses that might even operate seasonally and literally only want it for a few months. However, he said, look, I don't know, may or may not work as a business model, and if it doesn't, we'll move to sort of 3 or 5 year leases and make it more conventional. But he saw that people might want to open something up, especially over the Christmas period, or maybe in the summer, selling produce or what have you. He also thought that it could be used as office space, but relatively temporary office space. The application is for use class E, and I put in the report a little bit about use class E, because certainly I think my mindset is still struggling to get over this, even though it's now nearly 4 years ago. Use class E amalgamates what were shops, what were offices, what were places serving food, and various other things, all into a single use class. So the fact that it gets permission means that almost any kind of commercial business could be operated from down there, including food businesses. It's clear that what he wants to do is make it attractive and encourage people in. He tells me that he's engaged with a business association who are very happy at the idea because they see it could become a draw. And if it brings more people into the town centre, presumably other businesses benefit. I'm sure as part of his attempt to quote unquote sell this to me, after I'd looked around that with him, he took me to another development that they'd done, which was number 1 Marketplace. You may recall we gave permission, I said we gave permission, we did not object to his plans to renovate the flats there, and he took me in and he showed me all of them. It's absolutely beautiful. And a very, very nice look of it. They're let out now to Airbnb. So there are 3 small, in effect, holiday lets. And then above that, which they haven't done anything with, there is a 4th flat, which is in fact, I understand, occupied by the same people who rent the Turkish barbers from him. So he actually controls the 3 kind of shop units around that corner. Obviously, he has the Savvy Travel one. He has a new one that's already got permission, which is 5. And if he gets these, he'll have another 4. He also owns another building in the town, which is rented out. So he will have a very dominant position in the market. That clearly has no part to play in the decision about planning merits. But I think it indicates that it's a man who wants to make this work. And if the finish of this project is as good as the finish of the flats, I think it'll look quite nice. It has to be an improvement on derelict lean-to buildings that are currently there. They offer nothing that they can't be used for anything in their present form. It does attach, in effect, to a listed building. In the design and access and heritage impact assessment, they talk about having to obviously ensure that that's done in an appropriate way. But I would imagine that all we perhaps want to say in that regard, if we are in favour of this, is that we would want to ensure that no damage is done to the existing fabric of the listed building that is there. But the actual buildings themselves are not, those units are not part of the listed building, as I understand it. Well, I say that, I mean, they are part of it, it is a listed building consent, but there is absolutely nothing historic, as it were, about them. I'll do it the other way around this time. Councillor Shura first and then Councillor Foote.
I'll be brief. It must be a vast improvement on what is currently there. I think it will be an asset to the town. I'm fully in favour of it. There we go. 30 seconds.
Very brief, very succinct. Thank you very much, Councillor Foote.
I was to say the same thing, except for is this an opportunity for Mr. Cheeseman to install power supply?
Now, there's a thought.
I don't do that.
Our erstwhile cheese seller in the market,
Right,
who has left us because of the power supply. Councillor Foote was suggesting, well, why don't you like to take one of these units?
oh, I
Because
see.
it's nice and small, it will have its own power supply.
Yeah.
Everything else. But of course, it isn't going to be there one day,
No,
it's going to be there.
But he might actually open a cheese.
Well, it's other places, other days, or maybe.
Yeah, anyway, I mean, I think the thing is, they're relatively small units. You could put, as you said, you could have produce outside.
Well, I'm thinking market stalls on the other side, on the big events. And the other thing is, pop-up, do you know these pop-up stores
Yeah.
where you pay low rent, you have a go? And this is ideal for that sort of thing.
Yeah, so it would certainly, I think, suit somebody who was putting their toe in the water. I think he thought of people who are selling online, but
Yes.
might want a physical presence.
Yes. Well, the vintage shop tried that, but I bet their rent was far too high.
Yeah. Obviously, I've no idea what kind of
It won't be a lot.
rentals he's going to look for. They're doing it.
The only thing I would say is, having spoken to a few shop owners around that area is, when I think Savvy Travel and
The other one,
what's opposite
the
from
front.
me?
Vanilla?
The mortgage thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when they were being done up, there was a lot of work, vehicles parking in spaces for all day at a time, and it
Leighton Park.
caused a lot of people to be not happy. So, I'm gonna say again, construction management plan.
And I think
But presumably they can.
probably with this one, I can see
They
the
can
desirability of
go
it.
park
You
down.
can get vehicles down there.
Yeah, it is quite a lot.
They used to get lorries in there delivering
Full of carcasses.
carcasses
Yeah,
to
Yeah.
the back of the butchers. And there was certainly a car parked down there with plenty of space around it. And of course, it's not like there's anything existing down there. So it's not like
It's
central
not
yard, it's not impacting any other residents. You did make a point, I think I should have said this actually, about lighting it. And what I don't think you can see from any of the photographs, but if you're down at the far end, at the garage, looking back up, on your you see, you don't get an impression here. On the left-hand side, there are
Lights.
well, I think, I'm assuming there are flats over some of the other retail premises that are to the left of you, as you look back up.
yeah.
And I did slightly worry about whether light from here would impact people in the flats
Yeah, but on the window.
higher level, because you can certainly see, although you can't see them in that photograph, you definitely can see them if you're down the passageway.
I wouldn't have thought so,
What flats? Just you talking
off the top of my head, but
about? I don't understand. Which flats? Are they flats in?
I've set a pair out, I'll come to you in a moment, Councillor Chester. If you,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah, if you think about where we are, so there's Savvy Travel, there's the archway with the gates to here. If you think of the commercial properties that lie immediately to the right-hand side of this, I can't think of the name of it.
The round
The one where there's a beauty parlour and there's a massage.
Fashion.
Yeah.
Is that the one where you mean?
the rounded house.
And then
Yeah,
That's it.
that house, yeah.
Yes, Councillor Arnold is right.
We know it.
But I think that over some of those buildings, there may well be living accommodation.
Yeah,
And as I say, when you go down that passageway, you can look back up it, and undoubtedly they're at such a height that they look over the wall and into the property. It might therefore be worth just saying that there should be some condition to ensure that any lighting of the area really is sort of downlit so that it throws the light down into the development and doesn't spill out from it.
It's Gowrie Lane.
Councillor
I
Chester.
was just thinking about, depending on what they are and how much business they do, one way or another. I mean, if it was somebody using it for storage and having lorries visiting the site, the impact on West Street would be pretty bad.
There's not a lot of storage.
On a
there.
very, you know,
Yes,
a very busy junction.
I mean, if you look at what is proposed in terms of those units, they are pretty small.
Yeah,
I doubt that people would rent them
for storage.
with a view to using them for storage.
Oh, I thought you mentioned it, somebody mentioned it earlier, that they might,
No,
somebody did.
no.
I don't think so.
There's a small, it's a very small store.
There is
It's
a
garage, but it's tiny, it's the size of a loo
I just
There is
mentioned
also a store, right,
at the end.
at the left-hand end, there's going to be a sort of a bin store, if you like, the refuse from the site.
I think it's brilliant.
Clearly, if any of those operated as any sort of a cafe or anything of that nature, it would, I would assume it's and potentially rubbish, so there might be
They
some.
wouldn't be able,
That's
there's
a
no
perfect
kitchen,
spot for a
there's no
cafe.
kitchen
They
facilities.
They're so small, it's difficult
Yeah.
to see how you could operate that. I mean, there's literally about 200 odd metres of square metres of space on each of them has a little lid. It's not like the Unit 2, which I talked about earlier, which has an office, which has a storeroom, which has a kitchen area and so on. These are much smaller units.
But a cafe would be, because you've got all the seating outside.
There's no kitchen, they've got no
But there is
kitchen.
Uh, there is in the, no, I thought the bottom one had it, but no.
No.
Well,
That's interesting.
I just mentioned it because to me, I can picture the butcher backing the man in through that gateway frequently, with great difficulty,
Yes. Yes, I know.
and it just fits.
well,
Well, that's a hand.
could always put on there, not for use for storage.
Well, I think that, as I mentioned earlier, it's a very wide use class.
Was that
I
done
mean,
so that,
given that Mr. Grace was telling me that he wasn't keen on letting out Unit 2 to a kebab shop, I
Yeah.
doubt he'd be
No.
particularly keen on letting him out.
The storage, no, there's a lot of shops
I mean,
there.
I'm not against it, but I just do think
Yeah.
it's fraught with difficulty.
Yes, and I don't know quite how one could.
The mother
Guard
lived in
against
Ulster.
No,
I mean, I think, again, whilst there's one or two sort of things that have popped up, by and large,
yeah,
well, we're certainly not objecting, but I think actually we'll probably go further, and Councillor Shura supportive of it.
I think it's.
I have to say, and was in no way swayed by my meeting with Mr. Grace, but just the concept. The idea of getting 4 further retail units into the centre of town, which is difficult to envisage how else it could happen, that might act as a draw is very attractive to me.
Just to me.
Yeah, so I
it's
think,
going to be interesting to see what,
yes,
What happens?
yeah, what happens.
yeah. Yes, we're enthusiastic, but we do have a finger crossed at the same time, just in case. Okay, and we might want to put a condition in there about light. I don't know, I mean, given the sort of things that are going to go in there, I don't see this being part of what I might call generally the late night economy. I think the units there are going to close down at 5 o'clock in all probability. So I don't think we're going to worry about generating noise or anything.
No, I think it's going to be
Um,
shops,
okay.
trees.
These appear in a slightly different order in my report, but we're into trees. 43 South Road. Only reason we've got it is because it's in the tree conservation area. They appear to all be
Husband.
tree husbandry. Our usual policy around tree husbandry is we're not going to object. B, you may recall that I think it was our last meeting, we had drawn to our attention by the planning authority the kind of position around applications concerning trees in the tree conservation area. It led us to make certain observations which we'll come on to when we see outcomes later. But I can't see any likelihood that we will be inviting them to apply a tree preservation order to any of these trees. A, seems to be nothing particularly special about them. B, with due respect to South Road, it's not exactly a prominent position, etc. So I would have thought it's probably almost a no comment rather than a no objection, but
Yeah.
I don't really care which way we express it.
No comment.
The next one, however, is somewhat different. It's somewhat different because we're talking about tree preservation orders affecting these trees. They're two sycamores. As you will see from the agenda and also from a short report, it is said that they are poorly and that they will need getting rid of essentially.
I've got a photo of the
And
change.
then there's going to be, yeah,
Hmm.
so, yes.
The disease.
I mean, normally we don't get that much with trees. I remember this has been a bone contention in the council for years and years. We often only get an application, which often says very little, a location plan if you're lucky. There's not really anything here either. So all I can say is that what you have available to you is what is available. I would perhaps suggest that this is one for saying that, provided the tree officer does not object, we would ourselves not object.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Keep it simple.
Which brings us on to something quite interesting. And that is, where it is, yeah, sorry. It's 88 West Street. If we can get to, there's a photograph that we need to have in our minds. I went and had a look at this when I was doing my,
Where are we now?
so this is 88 West Street. It's the new beauty salon
Oh, just that.
next to George Stubbs' currently vacant model shop
Which you do.
on this street. And there's a picture. And you will see at the top wording Lux Skin Lab, and you will see to the left a hanging sign mounted on the wall. Now, if you, as it were, imagine that same picture without the hanging sign, it's exactly what it currently looks like. Because that wording is already up, it already looks exactly like that. Although the application appears to be, as it were, for everything, which therefore suggests that although it isn't described as a retrospective application, it is in part. The Lux Skin Lab bit, to me, just doesn't look in any way particularly controversial. I mean, it's relatively sort of neutral colours. Yeah, the word skin's quite large, but it's sort of tailored on that facial. But it talks about, on the application, and this is where I find it all gets a bit confusing, shop front signage with LED light, shop front hanging signage with LED light, and an LED TV screen behind the door window. That's what it says on the application. Well, I'm assuming that what they mean by the door window is that. But if you're going to look at the TV screen,
I think it's probably the other one, actually.
The other one's the door.
No,
It's got a
but
metal
that's
box.
also-
there's a door with a handle there, there's a door with a metal box, it looks like there.
Is this retrospective?
Well, I think it is in part, because it already looks like that.
Maybe I'll send you
But that is not there.
1, 2,
It's
The new windows at the top, they're new. So that they,
No,
It's not retrospective, I don't think.
well, it doesn't describe it as,
They-
but I think it is.
they're filled in stone in the middle between the two doors.
no,
That
they
was
haven't.
previously wood,
That was there before.
but it was wood.
That's exactly how it
The
was
shop
before.
front hasn't changed, they've not changed, they've just changed the colour.
All they've
Or
done is
signage.
put black skin mat at the top. You can look at the picture here, of Just Let's as it was.
Yeah, I've got.
Oh, you've got it there in the Google thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I am slightly trying to work out where this TV screen goes. It can't be there if you're going
I
through
just
that
think it'll be
door.
the middle.
It could be there. The more logical place is there, but then why would you describe it as a door window? I don't know. Unless you mean window between two doors. But I'm less concerned about the LED screen here.
Yeah.
And if it's there, it's there. The only thing I can remember relatively recently is on the Wharf building. You may recall
Yeah.
that we had an application and they wanted to put an LED screen in there. We were a bit concerned because of the traffic implications of it. Might actually be a bit of a road traffic hazard. It's not going to be a road traffic hazard there in any way, shape or form. But shop front signage with LED light. Now the question is, there is no light currently up there, because I've looked. There is nothing shown on this to show a light. Similarly, that which is not currently there, again, the application talks about shop front hanging signage with LED light. But it caused me to go and have a little look at our planning guidance.
There's no plans on there.
No,
Is that the only thing we've got?
Oh, that's fine.
it's, yeah, I thought, well, right, I can't see it anywhere
That
on the
doesn't-
photograph. Can I see it
No,
on any kind of a plan?
there isn't.
And the short answer is, no, you can't.
No.
And
I'll be
it's
looking at
completely
that.
mad. So I'm really struggling with this application because frankly, I don't really understand it.
Is that what we can say there?
And, well, we might end up saying that, amongst other things. The building itself, is significant, it's grade 2 listed, it's located within the conservation area, and I'm putting a bit of information in about the listings I usually do. The application form sets out dimensions, all of which I put into the report, because that's what the application form requires. And as I put at the end, although the heritage impact assessment supports the application, which is incredibly brief, it adds nothing to the above, other than to say the proposed palette is neutral colours, to state that the hanging sign will be fitted to existing bolts in the wall, will take the form of a circle protruding from the building. Now, it may be somewhat significant about if there's an existing fitting or something fitting something onto it, you're not actually doing anything to the fabric of the listed building. However, we do have
The least we can see it.
a policy on illuminated signs in the conservation area.
Yes.
One, internally illuminated signs, it says, save in exceptional circumstances, application for planning permission for the installation of any internally illuminated sign on buildings in the conservation area or installed internally but visible externally are unlikely to be supported. And then externally illuminated signs, there's no objection in principle to externally illuminated signs being erected on any non-listed building in the conservation area. But if the nature or number or size or general appearance of any sign is out of keeping with the conservation area, then application for planning permission are unlikely to be supported. That's what our policy said from goodness knows how many years ago. But the problem with this is, I don't understand what they're saying about lighting beyond the use of the terminology in the application. There's no indication where these lights are or anything. And if you're going to mount a light on the wall to illuminate that hanging sign,
We need to know.
well, it raises all sorts of issues in my mind. So, Councillor Shore.
Yeah, for me, it's relatively cut and dry, and that is that until they supply the information that you've already suggested isn't there, i.e. More precise information on where these lights are going to go, and how they're going to project, etc. We oppose it until we've got the information that allows us to make an appropriate decision.
I agree.
I think we are.
We don't have enough information.
Yeah, so we object on the basis of the
Not enough.
lack of information and the fact that it may well breach our
Yeah.
planning guidance. No doubt write something after that one as well. Right. So,
Yeah.
Herne Road. Most of the applications seem to concern like West Street or Herne Road. And this is 5 Herne Road. And single story rear extension. As I put in the report, work involves the demolition of an existing outbuilding described on the plans as a shed. Actually, the shed is halfway down the garden. Described in the application as being dilapidated and redundant. The extension will be in brick painted white to match the existing. Parapet roof section of slate, also matching the existing, and a flat roof in what is described as Samuel grey. Not sure what that is. I've given the dimensions such as they are on the plan. What is clear is that there is an existing rear extension on the western side of the property, and basically this new extension will simply build up to the same line, so it doesn't project further, as it were, into the garden. And at the back there would be this 3 glazed panel bifold door, which opens into the rear garden. And no changes to access parking or anything else. So, so here's the frontage, completely changed. Here is the rear. Currently, you'll see an extension there. You'll notice that that bit
Oh, I see.
is in effect the same. What we've now got is an extension coming out this way, and there's the triple bifold doors at the back.
No problem.
I don't think there's anything else much to say about it, to be honest. I couldn't think of a single reason to be worried about it.
Totally agree. Yeah.
You all happy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to have at least one you can just raise to
Just
and
say-
say no objection to. Guess what? Not only is it retrospective, but it's the second time we've seen this application in a relatively short period of time. The history of this is that my attention was drawn to the existence of this structure by a local resident.
Yes.
And I went down and had a look at it and was somewhat horrified by it, to be frank. It had been drawn to the attention of the planners, and it had obviously been drawn to the attention of the landowner, who put in an application for retrospective permission, which we took one look at. Well, probably, to be fair, slightly more than one look at, but essentially we objected. And our objection said that given the structure has been built in the garden of a listed property in the conservation area, applicants should have known the work should be undertaken unless and until any consent was granted. Does that have a familiar ring? It's making exactly the same point about another property in West Street only the other week. Had an application been made prior to construction, council would have indicated it objected to the application And if these applications are refused, the applicant should be required to remove the structure and make good. The structure visually detracts from the listed building, and the adverse impact is such that the structure should never have been built. The impact is noticeable both from within the grounds of the property and from the views beyond it. The structure has been constructed by utilising the stone garden walls of the property, which is unacceptable. And it is a very solid looking building. However, somewhere,
There we go.
And not a single beauty, rest of the same.
essentially, you'll notice that what we've now got is in effect a wooden structure with a roof, which is very different to what is currently there, because what is currently there is a sort of a very solid looking structure. And essentially we're taking the walls away. At least that's the proposal, in order to try and secure retrospective permission at what I might call the second attempt. And bear with me a moment. Yeah, so I set out the history about the previous application. We had objected, and the grounds for refusal by NNC, which I think are worth reading. The garden structure, by reason of its size, scale, design, and elevated position, because it is very elevated, because the car parking area is very much below it. And this, of course, is built on a raised garden and built into the wall, forms a visually prominent and jarring feature within its historic setting, and therefore harms that setting and the historic and architectural appearance of the Grade 2 listed building and the character of the conservation area. So that's what the planning authority thought of it when it rejected the previous application, which was simply to retain what is already there. So now we have a new design and access statement with heritage impact assessment built in. And the first point they make is that the structure has no irreversible impact upon the property. In other words, presumably it could be relatively easily removed without causing any damage to the property. They say it doesn't damage, remove or alter any of the merits of listing and conservation, which is an odd way of putting it, which we said. The revised design takes on board the previous refusal and reduces the prominence and massing of the current structure. New plans for the timber-clad walls on the south and east elevations to be removed to reduce the massing of the structure. The revised design has the timber roof supporting posts entirely within the garden walls, posts being set on it, and the roof will be lowered by 100 millimetres. Drainage, as was proposed, would be to a water butt on the site as opposed to the current arrangement, which just discharges it straight out to the car park. And Historic England have said they have, as it were, no advice to make and just refer it as usual to the conservation officer. So the question is whether that change removes our concern. Councillor Chester.
I seem to remember there was quite a lot of when people appearing here. I was spoken to by people. There was a lot of consternation about this structure. To my mind, when I first saw the pictures, I thought bus stop.
Yes.
Looks like a, and I don't think the new proposition is any better.
Councillor Sherwood.
Yeah, my memory from when this has been discussed before, certainly when it was discussed the first time, is that there were local objections. It was not just about the structure itself in the conservation area, but also the fact that anybody who were sitting out there had views over other areas. And also I seem to remember that there was also a complaint about the noise that was being made from there.
Yes, I think you're right on both counts, although I don't really think that the fact that noise is being made is necessarily a planning issue.
Yeah,
It could be an
no,
environmental
absolutely.
health issue. And if it's excessive noise, the environmental health officers can do
Yeah.
something about it. As to the fact that people could, as it were, sit there and look out, the reality, of course, is that if it wasn't there, they could sort of stand there or put a
Sure.
deck chair up and still be looking out, because that is at a considerable height compared to the car park. And therefore you can look down and across towards the properties that are on the opposite side, so to speak, of the mews.
They can't help their height. It's the nature of where they are. It's like living on a hill and looking onto other people's property. Personally, looking at the new pictures, I remember the old pictures, it was just like a monolithic thing. They've made an attempt to make it less of a monolithic thing. So I'm a little bit more sympathetic, is my view.
Councillor Arnold?
Yeah, I would probably echo
Yeah, I mean,
They're trying.
there is absolutely no doubt that what was put up was, well, it was all the things that actually NMC described it as. It was in a prominent position, it was jarring, it was just utterly wrong. I wonder whether if that had come to us prior to it being constructed, we'd have actually been that worried about it. Bearing in mind that it's not sited on the wall as such, and as it were, it's a structure you can now see through.
It's an issue about not satisfying everybody all the time. And they've made a compromise. So that's an important point to make.
They've
Therefore,
certainly made an effort, because it's going to cost them presumably money to alter it, not insignificantly.
Can I
Councillor
remind you
Richardson?
that the biggest worry last time was that they were actually including into the structure the party wall. That was
Yes,
not
that's
theirs.
Well, yes, there's a, because of the way it's done, there's a stone wall that kind of, best way of putting it, really, backs onto the car park. In other words, the back of the garden has a stone wall, and then beyond that, at a completely lower level, is this sort of car park area within the mews. I have to say that I think I tend to agree with Councillor Furlong in as much as just look at it now and think, well, because I can see through it, I just don't have the same degree of concern as I did. I mean, certainly I think the previous one was awful, but I'm so sure.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. But my previous comments actually have nothing to do with it. I was trying to remember the discussion and particularly the complaints that people have made. But you're right to point out, Chair, that they're actually nothing to do with planning per se. So in that sense, I agree that they've made a valid effort to produce something that is far more sympathetic of the site. And in that sense, I don't have an objection.
Well, I think there is a majority view, at least, that this time round we wouldn't object to the further application on the basis that it has significantly changed the level of impact.
just
And
one
I
more.
just hope that when I go and see it, I don't regret that decision.
I'll remind you.
Yeah,
You will.
Just one last point, can we, is there wording we can say which says we appreciate that they listened to the comments and they've reacted accordingly?
Yeah, I mean, not that they had a great deal of choice, I suppose, when you think about it. Their application had been refused, enforcement action could have followed.
All right, so
Have they
it's
just
not
left
relevant to this one?
I don't
No.
think it is necessarily as relevant as it might be in some cases,
No, it's fine.
to put it that way.
Looking great,
because
Mr.
what they say is, look, we see why you refused it, and we've done something about it.
Yeah.
And that's fine, because they have, and I think it's checked the balance
Yeah.
away from the subjective.
Can I refrain from the
Well, yes, I note your position. But there we are. Interesting to see what the conservation officer is coming out. That deals with all of the applications on the plan. There are just a couple of planning outcomes, but it is perhaps worth just spending a moment on the first of those. You may recall that at our last meeting, we had this big debate about the fact that with trees in the conservation area that weren't listed, all you could actually do if you were worried was invite listing. And that's what we did with that very prominent lime tree. But you'll notice that the application has been granted, and I assume that it hasn't had a TPO made, because I'm sure that if it had been, somebody would have probably told us. So
That's it.
it might be interesting to contact the tree officer and ask why, in the light of what we had said, nothing seems to have been done about putting a TPO on. And let's just get their reaction, because I'll be fascinated to see why a tree in that very prominent location wouldn't be. 81 West Street, got permission. And somewhat interestingly, planning appeals, you may recall 99 Avenue applied for permission to put a porch on. We didn't object to it. NNC somewhat surprisingly said, this is, it's too much, and refused it. And the occupant took it to appeal and has succeeded on appeal. So in effect, the inspector seemed to have agreed with our approach to it, that actually there was nothing fundamentally wrong with it. Though I noticed that the inspector didn't actually award costs against NNC, relieved them greatly. But there we are, that's all the planning matters there, which only leaves any other relevant matters for the report. Was it Chestnut? Planning mention. That's right. Just give me 1 minute, because I know there was something I was going to say, and it's gone completely. I knew I should have written it down.
There's something written on my copy.
Yeah, that's mine.
That's
what I was
yours.
going to mention.
Oh, bother. It's just not looking.
It's nothing to do with the Riverside structure or the chaplaincy, is it?
No, although if you have any news on
No,
either.
I'm just going to say, I've emailed and I haven't got there, because they've not come back to me.
It's just gone completely. Can't fit the life of it.
We send it as an email.
Well, if it's worth it, I'll email everybody because it's gone completely. So on that basis, at 5 to 9, I'll call the meeting closed.
Thank you very much. Right, I will say adjourn.